Welcome to the Marvel Mindset, a podcast from ex-Marvel CEO Peter Cuneo. Listen as Peter shares inside stories of what it took to turn around Marvel. Here's your host, Peter Cuneo.
Well, welcome back to the final episode of the Marvel Mindset. I've had a great deal of fun recording these sessions and hope that our audience, if you're listening or watching, that you got something fun and something to learn from as well. Today, I'd like to talk not so much about Marvel, but answer some questions that I often get in my speeches and online about leadership, all of which will pertain to Marvel. But I think that some things you might be interested in. And one of the questions I often get from particularly young people is, should I, as a young person, follow a career in turnarounds? If you haven't been inside on a turnaround, they look pretty fun. You can make some real money. You feel pretty good about achieving a change and a turnaround. Of course, most people don't realize, as I've said before, I believe 9 out of 10 turnarounds fail. And the stress level while you're doing a turnaround is definitely not small. So first question I'd like to discuss is simply, are turnarounds for you? So, of course, there is no classical career path for a turnaround. I'm not aware of any undergraduate business programs or MBA programs having a major in turnarounds. It's really an acquired situation. As I've said before, I was actually thrown into my first turnaround. I had no idea that I had any skills at all or that I even like it. And interestingly, after my second turnaround, I realized I was completely addicted to these situations. But it's not one that I chose to follow as a conscious decision. The technical skills for a turnaround situation are the easy part. I think that that's something that most people, particularly if you got a background in finance, for example, most people can absorb those skills pretty easily. Here's the hard part. It's the soft side of a turnaround. You're going to be working in an environment, as we've talked about before, that's very uncertain. You're going to have depressed and scared employees. You're going to have, in some cases, enraged customers and investors. And you're going to have to be able to cope with all of them. So the hard part is intestinal fortitude. Can you do that? Can you exist in that kind of environment for an extended period of time? When I talk to people about this, I like to talk about a simple matrix, a matrix between risk and reward. So I'm talking about high and low risk, high and low reward. So there are really 4 boxes on this matrix. So let's start with risk. So let's start with low risk, low reward. This is a situation that most human beings aspire to. It's nice. It's calm. There's very little disruption in your life overall. And this is frankly what most, and I'm going to say this is normal, what most normal human beings are happy with. A low risk, low reward situation that they can count on to have very little change. If that's the area you want to be in, turnarounds are not for you, and that's fine because you are normal. Now let's talk about low risk, high reward situations. This is something we'd all love to find in our lifetime. The truth is, these situations virtually don't exist. Low risk, high reward. This is something, again, we all dream about. And if you're lucky to find even one of these situations in a lifetime, you are a very lucky person. But again, these situations don't exist. Aspire to them, try to find them. Great, no problem. But don't be disappointed when you don't find these situations. Now, going over to high risk, we have high risk, low reward. Obviously, you want to avoid these situations. Nobody goes into a high risk, low reward situation consciously. Sometimes you can be fooled. But the reality is this is something to be completely avoided. High risk, low reward. doesn't do it for anybody. And that brings us to high risk, high reward. And that brings us to turnarounds. And for some people who are not normal, people like me, this is a big deal. This is something that you really enjoy. If you're successful, you enjoy the financial fruits of your success, but you also have tremendous amount of enjoyment mentally, just feeling the sense of accomplishment. It is very possible to often have what I call a natural high, because you see that what you've accomplished has been very, very impactful on the lives of a lot of other human beings. And you are able to pull that off with their help, of course, but very, very important, but not for everybody, because the stress can be very, very difficult to handle. And anyone going into a turnaround has to be aware of that. Be honest with yourself. It may be that you can handle this, or it may be that you're the low risk, low reward type of person, which is absolutely fine. Only you can really answer the question, are turnarounds for you? Let's pause for a moment. I'll be back right after this. One of the other questions that I get quite often is, what are some of the 28 essentials that you learned or were strongly reinforced by your experience as the CEO of Marvel? So there's a couple that I like to cover right now, and hopefully leave some thoughts behind for all of our audience to think about in their own personal cases. The first one is, as the turnaround leader coming into a situation, always project positive energy from minute number one. This is actually the first of the 28 essentials for superhero leadership, and comes first because you're walking through the door on day one. And that positive energy is projected not only by how you speak, but also how you behave. Your body language actually matters a great deal. And I've learned this one the hard way in the past. I was not necessarily good at this. And I've learned that positive energy is optimism is very, very important for people. Never underestimate how closely they are watching and talking to each other about how you come across. And you can find a lot of the topics that I'm talking about, which are part of our 28 essentials for superhero leadership. You can find the 28 at petercuneo.com. And please take them, absorb them. They were written for turnaround situations, but they certainly apply to any leadership situation or anyone aspiring to leadership of any age. Another one of our 28 essentials that was very important at Marvel and is important all the time is communication. Communication is an art form. It's largely being lost in the world because of technology. We communicate now via Zoom. We communicate on our cell phones, but we're really not projecting the way we do when we're face to face because of body language and other reasons. Effective leaders all communicate very regularly. They communicate honestly. They actually will talk about problems because they've learned that human beings would rather hear about the problems than hear nothing. Communicate when you have problems and about solving them. Very, very important. Communicate consistently, whether you're talking to an audience of 200 people live or whether you're sending a business update digitally around the world. You should be saying the same things. Leaders that are not effective, unfortunately, often are just parroting what they heard from the last person they talked to. And this is a big problem with poor leadership. Also with communications, have regular times for mass communications. Have them on the calendar so that the audience, your employees and others, know they can count on you to tell them what the latest situation is at a certain point, at a certain time. And once a month, once a week, whatever you think is appropriate, but they can count on you to talk to them about leadership in the company and how the company is doing. You'll find that your audience will find it actually quite comforting. And the last thing I think the last of our 28 essentials that really applies to all turnarounds and Marvel is number 18. It's the one I always say is the toughest, which is you have to have the mindset that you are going to make a lot of changes, and change will upset some people, most people. Even so-called positive change, because it's change, will upset people. And you have to be comfortable knowing that there are going to be people who don't like what you're doing, and that you are going to be unpopular with some people. Most human beings don't want to be unpopular with anyone, and that's natural. Again, that's normal. That's fine. You have to be, as I said, talking about turnarounds, the outlier, the non-normal person who is able to cope with, not be abusive to people. That is not what I'm talking about. Okay. But cope with the fact that you're going to have to absorb a lot of negative vibes from time to time. The changes you're making ultimately are going to make everyone feel good as the organization is successful. And now we get close to wrapping up here on episode 10, our last episode in the Marvel Mindset. I want to mention something that's very, very important. Marvel's success was due to hundreds of people's efforts. The media always upsets me when I would be interviewed and they would want to make me the sole hero, the superhero of Marvel's success. And despite in an interview me naming many other people that deserve credit and why, the mass media today just wants headlines and really doesn't communicate any of this. So today's CEOs, not only of turnarounds, but of most businesses, in the media's eye are either bums or superheroes. There's no in between. And no matter how big, how sprawling, how international a business is, it's, if they're successful, it's all that the CEO, him or her, are godlike. And it's not the case. I could not have been successful as the CEO and later vice chairman of the board at Marvel without support, help of hundreds of people. I have mentioned some names during these 10 episodes, people that did very important things for Marvel. People like Ike Perlmutter, Joe Quesada, Alan Fine, David Maisel, Avi Arad, and Mort Handel. But there were many, many other people. And if you're listening and you work at Marvel, I have to apologize. I just can't reel off all the names, people that made me look really good, even when I didn't deserve it. So in closing up here, I'd really like to thank all of the people at Marvel during that 10-year run from 1999 to 2009 when we sold to Disney. I'd like to thank all of you personally for what you accomplished. Thank you so much. And finally, as a postscript, I'd just like to mention some of the areas you might want to go to hear more about Marvel, more about leadership. PeterCuneo.com is a place where you can see and hear all of our podcasts. It's also a place where you can see the 28 essentials for superhero leadership. You can copy them for yourselves. You can use them as a score sheet, as a report card for yourself, if you're honest with yourself. How are you doing on that list? A lot of people over the years, even 5 and 10 years later, call me up and say, gee, Peter, I'm still pulling out the essentials and I'm getting better. Thank you so much, which makes me feel good, obviously. I should mention also, we have a book coming out. The target date is February 3rd of next year, 2026. And it's called Superhero Leadership. Again, that's our brand, Superhero Leadership. And I think that will be very exciting. I think there'll be pre-orders available on Amazon at some point. Not sure, but please look out for that. Again, that book talks about the 28 essentials in detail, in much detail, and my experiences with them, and my successes and my failures both. And then finally, let me just mention studio.com. Take a look at our app on studio.com. You can talk to me individually, although, if you will, AI assisted, and so on. One of my frustrations is that a lot of people reach out to me, would like to talk about leadership, some of their personal challenges. And unfortunately, I simply don't have the time to talk to the thousands of people that are looking for help. I'm a little down about it. It actually depresses me that I can't do it, but I can't. But studio.com is a solution to that. So please take a look at our app on studio.com. It's active now, and let us know what you think. So thanks so much for listening. If you've just tuned in recently, please go back and listen to all 10 of the Marvel Mindset episodes. Really appreciate it. Love feedback always. And again, thank you so much for your time, and good luck, and God bless.